After you have entered your budget into CenterPoint, there are several ways to be able to print that budget. One way is to print the budget from the budgeting tool, and that is discussed in a separate video. This video will concentrate on printing the budget from our standard reports. Those reports can be found by going to Reports and Reports. The section of reports that will allow budget information to be printed on it are found underneath Financial Statements, and the two reports that we can print budget information on are the income statement and the balance sheet. For those of you using our fund accounting product, you also can print budget information on the statement of revenues and expenditures. That is discussed in a separate video. You'll notice underneath income statement that there is already a variation of the income statement that includes the budget. Just keep in mind that I could add budget information to any variation, but I'm going to start with this variation. On the right, I'm going to select my date range, and so I've chosen year to date, and I'm going to select my company that I am producing this report for. And so that's CenterPoint Farm for this company. For those of you using fund accounting, the company is equal to a fund. I would make whatever other selections I wanted to make, but there are 4 filters at the bottom of my list that if they aren't showing on your list, you may want to add. To add those filters, you would click on More Items, and you could find the filters labeled Budget, Budget Variance Source, Revenue Variance Reporting, and Expense Variance Reporting. And all you need to do is put a check mark in those boxes, and that will include them on the list of filters. For the budget selection, I have chosen which budget I want to do the comparison for. If you don't select a budget, then it will select whatever budget is your default budget. Then I'm going to choose my variance source. What piece of information is going to be the source for all of your budget variance calculations? I've chosen that to be my current period. You could choose it to be any one of the other options on the list here. Then the last 2 selections let you change the direction on how your revenue and your expense variances are being reported. And you can see that you can change, the direction just by making the other selections. So when we preview the report, you'll see that my revenue and my expense variances are being calculated in a different direction, but I can change that. I'm going to go ahead and preview the report. In the standard variation, the actual date range is the same as the current date range. So it's my current amount and my current budget amount, same date range. Then I have a column for the variance and the percent of variance. However, that might not be the way that I want to present the budget. For example, I might want to do a comparison to my annual budget. I might want to see where I am year to date compared to the annual budget to see how much I have left in the budget. If you want to change the columns of the budget that are being displayed, we can do that by going to Columns and then going to the available columns. You'll see right now that the columns being displayed are the current budget amount, the current budget variance, and the current budget percent of variance. But if I go to the Available tab and then collapse the current section, you can see that there's other sections available. The current budget year to date would actually give me the same, for the report that I'm looking at, would actually give me the same information because my actual period is year to date as well. So that's not going to give me anything different for this report. But if I had just chosen my actual period as April, then current period or current budget year to date would give me January through April for the budget. Then the other section, another section is the annual budget. And that's where I can, put a column out there for annual budget so that I can see where I am compared to my annual budget. We also have sections for if you're doing a multi-year comparison for presenting budget information from prior years. I'm going to open up the current period and take off those columns that are currently being displayed. And then I'm going to open up the section for annual budget by clicking on the plus sign and adding the columns for annual budget amount, annual budget variance, and I'm going to add the column for annual budget percent of variance. And then I'm going to go to the selected tab. I'm going to make sure that those are in the order that I want them to appear on the report, and they are. I'm going to move those up with the other selected columns and then click refresh. And now we can see that my budget is no longer the same period of time. So it's not January through April. My budget is showing the entire year. So now when I see the variance, it's comparing it to my annual budget. I do want you to note that the variance is being calculated different for my revenue than my expenses. You see my revenue, it's being calculated as my actual amount minus the budget. And then down in my expense and cost of goods section, it's taking the budget amount minus the actual. So it's just calculating it in the opposite direction. And again, I could go back to my filters and make a different selection as to which way I want that to be calculated. I do want to note that if you're just looking at printing the budget and you don't want to do any actual information on the report, you can just remove the actual columns and the variance columns and just print out the budget. So you can just use this to print the budget without doing a comparison to the budget. I'm going to close this report. And now I want to take a look at the balance sheet. And underneath the balance sheet, you'll also notice that there is already a variance that does a budget comparison. And again, you can really add the budget to any one of these formatted balance sheets. So it doesn't really matter whether or not you start with the budget there. That's just a convenience for you. As I highlighted on the right-hand side, I'm going to choose the period that I want to run the budget for, the company I want to run it for, and I've made sure that I added a filter called budget so that I can select which budget I want to use in the comparison. If that's not already on your filters, you can go down to more items. You can find the filter called budget and you could put a check mark in it to add it. I'm going to go ahead and preview this. And it gives me a report similar to the income statement, but it's always going to be the same period as what you've selected to run the balance sheet for. So I've selected to run the balance sheet for April, so it's also giving me the budget information for that same time period. And then you can add a variance column, a percent of variance. Okay, underneath columns, you'll notice that we have less selections for the balance sheet. You really only have that one budget amount that you can use in the comparison. It wouldn't make sense to do year to date or annual. So it's just really the same value. So this is that value actual, this is that value budget. Again, if you wanted to only print the budget information, then you could remove the columns for actual and any variances from the report.